Act 1, The Incident. They called it a family town. One church, one school, fewer than 200 people. Beason, Illinois was the kind of place where neighbors left doors unlocked, and nobody imagined monsters could live among them. But on the morning of September 21, 2009, that illusion was shattered forever. In a single-story home on North Broadway Street, a scene of unimaginable horror was discovered. 5 members of the G family bludgeoned to death with a tire iron, their skulls caved in, their bodies lying where they'd fallen. Blood soaked the walls, the carpet, even the children's toys. They were a family like any other, a hard-working couple, Ruth and Rick G, raising their kids in peace. Until that night when evil didn't just knock, it walked in, with rage, with silence, and with a weapon that didn't stop swinging. This wasn't just murder, it was a massacre. And the worst part, the killer knew them, had shared meals with them, had joked with their kids. He knew how to get in and how to make sure no one got out. "I've never seen anything like it," a sheriff would later say. "Not here, not in Beason." Act 2, Timeline of Discovery. The first signs of something wrong came just after 4 p.m. on Monday, September 21st. A family friend, concerned after not hearing from the G's, arrived at the house. They'd missed appointments. Calls went unanswered. It wasn't like them. What the friend walked into was every parent's, every neighbor's, every human's nightmare. Inside the home were the bodies of Rick G, 46, his wife Ruth, 39, and 3 of their children. Justina, 16, Dillian, 14, and Austin, 11. All beaten to death, all bludgeoned with a level of force that detectives described as overkill. Only one person had survived, 3-year-old Tabitha G, barely clinging to life. She had a fractured skull and severe brain injuries, but she was breathing. The first responders were horrified. Even seasoned law enforcement struggled to process what they were seeing. The entire town of Beason was locked down. A killer or killers was on the loose. No one felt safe. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was it a robbery gone wrong? A drug deal? A stranger? But very quickly, the police realized the truth was much closer. In fact, it was family. Act 3, The Victims and Their Life. Rick and Ruth G weren't wealthy or famous, but they were respected. They were known for their honesty, their work ethic, and their commitment to raising their children right. Even when life had been hard. Rick was a laborer. Ruth worked odd jobs to keep the household afloat. They had 5 children, Justina, Dillian, Austin, Tabitha, and a son who no longer lived at home. They didn't have much, but they had love. Justina was a sophomore in high school, bright, sensitive. She'd told friends she dreamed of becoming a teacher. Dillian loved video games and baseball. Austin, just 11. And little Tabitha? She was the light of the house. Always singing, always dancing, a toddler whose smile could quiet any storm. They were the kind of family people waved to from porches. Ordinary, unremarkable. But their deaths would leave a wound that never healed, not just in Beason, but across America. What made their story even more unbearable was who had taken that life away. Because the man responsible wasn't a stranger, he was blood. Act 4, Crime Scene Breakdown. The scene inside the G household was described as a slaughterhouse. Investigators found pools of blood stretching across rooms. There were drag marks, trails of carnage. The walls were splattered so violently that forensics initially believed a firearm had been used. But it wasn't bullets, it was a tire iron. Each victim had suffered massive blunt force trauma to the head. Many had defensive wounds, especially the children. They'd fought back. They had tried to escape, but it was no use. The killer had time. He knew the layout, he knew the people, and he made sure they couldn't scream. What chilled detectives most was the detail and control. The bodies had been killed in sequence. There was no frenzy, no mess of confusion. It was cold, deliberate, systematic. And the only clue left behind? A half-eaten sandwich in the kitchen. The killer had stopped for a bite. He wasn't in a rush. Little Tabitha, found barely alive in a crib, had skull fractures and injuries indicating she too had been struck. But for some reason, she was spared. Maybe it was mercy. Maybe it was hesitation. Maybe it was guilt. But the person who did this had looked into these children's eyes and kept swinging. Act 5. Suspicion and lies. In small towns, secrets don't stay buried for long. And very quickly, the investigation zeroed in on one name, Christopher Harris. He was Ruth's ex-brother-in-law, married to her sister at one point, a man with a history of violence, manipulation, and explosive anger. He claimed to have a solid alibi. He said he was out all night with his brother Jason Harris, watching TV and drinking. But his story changed with every interview, and phone records, they painted a different picture. Even more suspicious, Christopher had scratches on his arms and blood on his clothes. He claimed it came from yard work, but the timeline didn't add up. Police began digging into his life. What they found was a man who had become obsessed with Ruth. Friends said he'd made multiple passes at her in the past, despite being her former in-law. He was spiraling, unemployed, paranoid, angry at the world. When asked if he had enemies, Rick G had once joked, "Only family." Act 6. The turning point. The case finally broke open when Christopher's own brother, Jason Harris, came forward. He couldn't keep the secret anymore. Jason had been terrified. He kept the secret out of fear, but after weeks of interrogation, he cracked and the truth spilled out. Police arrested Christopher Harris in October 2009. He was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and multiple counts of child endangerment. But the horror wasn't over. Not yet. The trial would take years. And even then, Christopher Harris had one more lie to tell. Act 7. Psychology and motive. At trial, Christopher Harris spun a final, desperate story. He claimed he didn't kill the family. Instead, he said he walked in on 14-year-old Dylan G, murdering his own family with a tire iron, and in a panic, he killed Dylan in self-defense. It was a story as twisted as it was insulting. He wanted the jury to believe a teen boy suddenly snapped, killed his own parents and siblings, and that Harris, just a coincidental witness, had been forced to take him down. But the forensics betrayed him. Dylan's body showed no signs of struggle. His wounds came from behind. And the most telling of all, Dylan's DNA wasn't on the weapon, but Christopher's was. The truth was much simpler and darker. Christopher Harris had wanted something. Some say he resented Rick G's success. Others believe he had become fixated on Ruth G, jealous of her life, angry that he wasn't part of it. And when rejection combined with failure, something inside him broke. Clinical psychologists who examined the case described him as a narcissist with violent tendencies, someone who felt entitled to control others, and when he couldn't, he destroyed them. Even his own brother Jason said, Chris didn't care who he hurt, he just wanted them gone. He didn't just kill the family, he tried to erase their story. And in doing so, he left a town shattered and a baby girl scarred by a memory she was too young to understand, but will always carry in silence. If you've stayed with us this far, hit the like button to honor the victims of this senseless act. They deserve to be remembered. Act 8. Aftermath and emotional echo. In May 2013, Christopher Harris was convicted on all counts. He received 5 consecutive life sentences. No parole, no second chances. Jason Harris, the brother who helped him escape that night but later turned him in, served time for obstruction but was released on parole. Many say Jason's confession is the only reason the G family found justice at all. And little Tabitha G, the sole survivor, grew up in the arms of extended family. Her head injuries were severe, her trauma invisible but permanent. She was just 3 years old when she watched her entire world collapse in a single night. In interviews, family members say she's grown into a strong, gentle girl, one who laughs, plays, and finds light despite the darkness she was born into. But behind every smile is a story she didn't choose, and behind every bedtime story, a silence where her mother should be. The town of Beason never recovered fully. How could it? 6 lives vanished from a single house. A whole bloodline severed by one man's selfishness. This wasn't just a crime. It was a desecration of innocence. A brutal warning that the most evil monsters can live right next door. And sometimes they know your name. What do you think truly pushed Christopher over the edge? Was it rage, obsession, or something even darker? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to see more true crime cases that'll chill you to the core, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell.